Hey, my name is Matt Storr and I repair saxophones for a living. And this is probably going to be of limited interest to most people, but I just came across my notes from when I went to a East Asian saxophone manufacturer, and I was brought along to tell them what I thought about how they could improve their product. And it's kind of funny for me to look at. Maybe someone who would be interested. I figured I would go through it and talk about it, explain it. A lot of this stuff is still present. I mean, it's not. I think that as we go through this, we'll probably see that I was naive in expecting things to get much better. Things are the way they are because of profit margins versus like ignorance or like just a lack of information, and they really want to do a great job. Like it's all about making money, right? So um, we'll probably find we'll probably see, one, that I'm very naive, two, that I'm missing some stuff, and three, that it's probably going to be pretty evident why they didn't ask me back. Although they did take a lot of this stuff under advisement and actually make a lot of improvements to their product, which was pretty great. So in no particular order, because these were not stored in order. Um, Tenant alignment must be perfect, no gaps and no bumps. Yeah, so like, a lot of times you'll see like saxes, the neck goes in and it doesn't actually sit flat against the tenon. Hinge tubes should never end in a key arm. There must be a swedgeable space. So yeah, that's actually like a personal complaint of mine. That's talking about like long-term repairability. It's probably a bit much for a imported horn. Keys should be swedged and faced by hand, would need additional stations in manufacture. Yeah, not going to happen. Mandrel needs to fit exact. That's true. I could tell by looking at these horns that they were, sometimes not, that formed all the way down around the mandrel. They were a little bit different on the inside from one to the next. Filing rolled tone holes equals frowny face. Yeah, they were filing rolled tone holes to get them flat, which kind of defeats the purpose. Kahn did that like on the G sharp sometimes, just because that's kind of like the heart of the horn as far as that adjustment. Like a G sharp really has to seat well. So Kahn would actually do that from the factory sometimes originally, but not good to do it on every tone hole. Why are threads so rough? Cutting bits and tools. Yeah, I would notice like the threads on the rods would have like really rough threads, and it just didn't really make any sense like why they would be like that. In the end, I think I figured out that it was just kind of like bad quality steel that didn't cut very well with bad dies, and they just didn't, it stayed in place, so they kept it that way. Need to see their tools and methods. Yeah, because a lot of this stuff I sort of wondered why it happened. Spring length. Yeah, so there'd be, a spring like this long, on like the C sharp bar, and then a spring this long on the B, and like they're traveling the same distance, right? So a spring like that's really short is going to deflect a whole lot, right? Compared to a spring that's long is going to deflect a lot less. Longer springs give you a much better feel. And you sort of need to design, or you should, in my opinion, design a saxophone around your springs. If you look at like an old SML, all the springs are the same length, and those horns feel so good under the fingers. Key fit, post facing, hinge tube facing, needs to be smooth. Pivot screw redesign, along with with what? I can't even tell. This one does nothing. Yeah, so that's like what pivot screws look like on the inside a lot on cheap horns. It's just like, sliding and say it's like a cylinder, like a pointed screw sliding inside like a cylindrical receiver, and it doesn't really do anything. I mean, it keeps it in place between the posts, but it doesn't actually fit it on the pivot screw. This 3D bearing and fit, oh yeah, I said, a curve that can actually bear against, and then like the little tiny, that's actually like a little, like oil reservoir, and also sort of a bit of relief for like, making sure that like if you put grease in there, sometimes in a perfect fit, like it'll actually like bottom out and like kind of hydrolock. New adjustment materials, no sticky felt, real cork cannot be thick on key feet. Yeah, especially on key feet, when the key's like coming down at an angle around like a round tube, it'll kind of like hit in one spot and like, and sort of get like stuck. Even if you shape it so that it fits like exactly onto the body tube, real thick cork tends to squish a bit. Neck tenon and receiver must be machined much smoother, no buffing. Yeah, so the neck tenon and receiver were being, I remember this, you could see like machine marks in it, and then they were buffing that down so fit between like the neck receiver and the neck tenon just was completely variable and almost always was leaking. Lighter spring tensions. Now that's something you see in a lot of modern horns, right? The spring tensions are so tough, and I think that really has to do with, you know, they know the pad work isn't great from the factory, and they want you to squeeze really hard. So they give you really strong spring tensions, and you squeeze through it, and then you think your horn plays great because you're squeezing through all the leaks it comes out of the factory with. Low B flat rocker arm placement. Oh yeah. So this is something. It's gonna be grody. Can you believe it? This whole horn looks like this, like orange and green. I'm like most of the way done cleaning it. But like low B flat rocker means like this pivot back here, right? Means that, you know, it can tilt this way. It can also tilt this way, right? And depending on where your finger is, that means like on the horn, it's either going to tilt down or it can tilt down this way, right? And some of the stuff I was seeing was like they just didn't really understand how this mechanism worked, and they were putting this like at a weird angle that meant like it actually only ever went like this, or would depress completely flat, like bringing everything down with it. Obviously that's not the way that's supposed to work. Let's see. Left hand pinky cluster angle. Yeah, I think it was like kind of like turned away from the body, although you see that sometimes on vintage horns, like the Vito Duke has one that's like really far away from the body. Side F sharp and high F sharp need to come down. I'm not sure what that meant. I think they might have actually just had the tone holes like too far up the body, and then they were making the key heights really low to bring them back flat. Resonance equals relaxed. Annealing, no tension during soldering, minimal buffering, everything perfect fit, loose and tight. That means like, you know, you can't like, you know, if you're trying to solder the horn together, you don't want to be like clamping everything together and then you solder it together and you release the clamps. The solder's holding it together, but everything's under a lot of tension. In my experience, that robs the horn of resonance. And most often you'll see this like between like the, you know, the bow and the bell. If you like undo that bow to bell connecting ring with a screw, like if it pops out because it's been damaged in the past or something like that, that's a pretty, you know, pretty common place where there'd be a lot of tension in the build. But you wouldn't really know about the rest of it unless you like unsoldered, you know, one of those giant ribs like that holds the stacks on, and you see it like pop off or like bend. But you know, in the course of taking these horns apart to figure out what was going on, I saw that a lot, and you could just sort of tell that the horn was under a lot of tension. And I wanted to see how they were putting things together, and they were indeed like just sort of, you know, the parts didn't have a like slip fit. They were sort of being like wired together or clamped together and then soldered. Thinner, longer, better springs. I'm really hung up on the spring thing, aren't I? Post alignment. Rods must fall through freely. This needs a lot of work, many parts. Yeah, so like their post alignment wasn't very good. And their, you know, post to rod fit wasn't very good as a result. So they could like, you know, jam stuff through and not have it get bound up. And that was not good for key fit. And it was very, very hard to fix down the road. Hinge tube ends must be smooth. Roughness equals wear equals more wear equals skull and crossbones. Yeah, the end of the hinge tubes were like a rough cut. Pivot A mechanism on the upper stack equals garbage. Pretty opinionated there. Rolled tone holes need to be more level. Regular tone holes, check their tone hole pulling jig. Sleeve needs to fit better. Stop giving bumps to body. Tone hole edges must be straight and right angles to body. Yanagasawa style jigs, slow corkscrew, oval burnishing. Yeah, so this was like their tone hole pulling jig. I remember when I got there, I was like, oh, they were actually using a drill press that they would like, you know, like crank down, like, and it would like screw into a little rod, and then they would just go bam, 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 and like pull it like straight out of the body, and the whole thing's shaking. And like the sleeve that went over where the tone hole was supposed to be pulled out, you know, didn't fit right. So during all this like jamming it out, you know, the edge of the body, instead of like, let's see, do I have a pencil? You know, instead of looking like this, looked more like this. And it just, you know, that extra volume there is a major problem acoustically. That's a lot of volume. Like clarinetists will undercut and oboists will like undercut tone holes a tiny fraction of that and make a huge change to the instrument. You need to have the, form that you're pulling against be fit to the body like tightly, and then the ball that pulls up through needs to fit on the inside tightly, and it needs to be smooth and come up through here. Yanagasawa did that really well with a hand operated jig that I actually have pictures of on my website if you're interested. Let's see here. Let's go back. Corks and felts need some manners. When I worked in Bermuda, this old carpenter guy told me, like, making sure everything had nice clean corners, everything was parallel, everything looked good, because you can't, if you're looking at like carpentry and you're not a carpenter, the things you see aren't like the guts of it, right? What you see is the finishing details that don't have a lot to do with the structural integrity of the object, but they have to do with, what the layperson sees and enjoys. And he called those manners, and that stuck with me. Parts need to be made more perfect, less grinding and sanding, precision. Less mass on ribs, thinner. Yeah, the ribs on those horns were like so thick. Less buffing overall, less number of times. Yeah, I was curious about how they were doing that because like I could really see there was a lot of buffing going on with those horns. Stop lacquering the neck tenon and receiver. Yeah, the like neck tenon, and this is not a great example because this is a messed up neck, but they were lacquering this part, right? And they were lacquering the receiver part. So it was like loose fitting, buffed but still rough and lacquered on both sides. It's a really, really bad neck tenon. Key cups must be centered over the tone hole. Key arm redesign. No. Yes. Hard edge helps control placement. Also better jig and retraining. Yeah, that was something that the key cups were kind of always in a slightly different spot on the key arm. Key post and rib jigs need to be relative to tone holes. Let's see, what was I thinking there? Oh, yeah, so like the posts and the ribs were put on the horn in a way that seemed like it was relative to something other than the tone holes. Whatever location method they were using, the ribs were often in a slightly different location relative to the tone holes, like a little bit farther away or a little bit closer or a little bit up or a little bit down, and they were bending the keys to get them closer to the tone holes. And of course, if it's farther away, like it's going to be back around the back side of the horn, right? So like the key cup's going to be hitting like this, and so they bend it, it was causing lots of problems. Non-compressible materials needed. I think I was upset that they were using like really mushy cork everywhere and really thick pieces of it, so it was really mushy. Rod smoother, thread sharper and deeper, cut in a machine versus a die. Tone holes must be level, must be smooth. Remove filings, clean. What's that say? Mirror finish. And then bench perspective. I don't know what that means. I guess I was talking about like, what people who repair these horns down the road are going to see and then therefore say about the quality of the instrument. Need someone to see all the tools and how they build to understand and prescribe better ways to build. Fundamental change. Need a perfectionist, someone who loves the sax. I guess I was probably trying to convince them that they should talk to me. But anyhow, that's from probably, like 2006 or something like that. But, thought you might find that interesting. I'll upload this. I think this is a little bit weird for my channel. It's just kind of rambling stuff, but it's a little artifact that otherwise I wouldn't really have a place for. So hopefully you found this entertaining or interesting or food for thought.